Hey, Dooberteers, welcome back to the show. I think you're really going to like our episode today because it's all about disruption. It's all about doing things differently. And I found the perfect guy for this. John is somebody that actually took Shopify, the retail selling platform, and uses it for animals, right? So it's the only one of its kind that I know of, and they're wildly successful. They've increased the rate of adoption, lower the time and stay, and John's got all sorts of ideas. He comes from a background not in the sheltering world, but now he's running one of the largest shelters in Canada. So John, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me, Chris. Looking forward to our chat today.
Me too. You and I are definitely, two brothers from another mother, right? So tell us a little bit, introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, Chris, and not a flattering background, but I spent most of my life in retail, marketing background, sales, the traditional business guy, right? Lots of things in advertising, private label, things like that. And then had a change in life, one of those major moments in life where I found myself working for a charity and felt that, this was going to be a really easy gig going from corporate to not-for-profit charity, and found out later that I was totally wrong. And that, as the CEO, I had 35 more jobs and responsibilities than I left to my corporate life. But the greatest part of why I love what I do is that I can combine my business thinking with charity and the ability to deliver on mission, which is basically the best thing you can have in life, right? You get to do work, you still kind of apply your business learning, you make a few bucks on the way, but the best outcome is it's a good mission outcome. I'm not counting how many toothpaste and bags we're selling.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you love your job. You love going to work, right? It's a passion. It's fun. You can bring all of that experience from the real world into the animal welfare world, right? To solve a real problem.
I'll be honest, you and I feel like the animal welfare sector as a whole is behind. I feel that there is lots of disruption that needs to happen, and I hope that I can contribute. I love what you're doing, and I think in the end, we need more of this disruption in the sector in order to advance our own missions and ultimately the ultimate objective to put more furry friends in homes long term and reduce that population that we can't find homes for.
Yep. Sometimes it's hard to keep your eye on the prize. What are we in this for? What are we trying to do? But we've always done it this way. We've got all this tried and true methods. And, I went to a conference. We've been talking about the same thing at conferences for years. It seems like decades, right? And you go, okay, something's got to change. How do we disrupt? How do we move the needle? So I do want to start there. I mean, tell me, how did you come up with this idea for Shopify?
So again, being a business guy and feel like technology, I always look like the status quo is like the enemy of our mission, right? The way we do our business every day, the way it develops in what we're accomplishing. So if we don't spend time, so part of our mandate, let me just take a read back. Part of our mandate here is that the senior leadership team must spend one day a week on out of the box thinking. So they can't be doing their regular job. They've got to be thinking about ideas, looking at their competitors. Yes, we do have competitors in our space. People don't think so, but we do. And then in the end, how do we come up with those big ideas? So basically problem, adoptions, can't move them fast enough. Biased. One of the things I learned very quickly is that the people behind adoptions, and for all those that are watching, I apologize what I'm going to say first, but the idea behind it is we want them to fill 40 questions. We want them to tell us everything about their color of their eyes to what kind of clothing they like. And do you have a big fence, a little fence? And the main objective of adoptions should be to get someone to adopt an animal that they are going to love and care for and understand the relationship of that animal. The best way to do that is online. And the best way, instead of having people come to your shelter and line up for days and stress out the animals and all those kind of things,
right,
tell the story online. What is a better platform, we said, is Shopify. Change Shopify, use its systems to make an adoption platform. So instead of a basket, you have an adoption. Instead of, I'm going to look for a friend or a product SKU, I'm looking for a dog name. So we use Shopify. We changed it. We worked with it. We're the first ones in Canada. We were recently shown in New Zealand at one of their conferences down there about it. And I just think it's the perfect application. It's inexpensive. It's fast and easy to use. You collect data. You can communicate effectively without taking staff time. Overall, Chris, I could talk all day about the application, but the number one thing is, let's not be afraid of using technology in this sector, non-traditional technology that's outdated.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point, John, is look, sometimes we get so focused on what is the shelter management technology, what is the thing specifically for this purpose, but sometimes you just got to be scrappy. And when you look at this, I mean, you and I have talked about before, at the end of the day, yes, they're loving, living, sentient beings, but it's still a retail store that you're operating, right? That's what you're operating.
Absolutely.
And from a business model, right? And so what's the best for operating online retail stores? Oh, guess what? It's Shopify, right? Like you said, it's one of the most inexpensive. There's other ones out there that are, big, multi-billion-dollar company size ones. Shopify is perfect, from the person that's making their own sweaters on the weekend to obviously what you guys are doing for adoptions. It does everything.
Listen, sometimes we don't look exactly in front of us. And again, AI today can build you a platform. Yes, there's gaps and there's things, learnings happening, but it can build you your own app in 20 minutes. It can build your own app in 40 minutes, depending on the complexity. But again, it's that embracing of technology to use for a mission purpose. We've got to forget about what does Shopify mean in our head. Oh, that sounds very commercial. It sounds like we're selling animals. We are adopting animals. It's a transactional experience. We're trying to encourage people to do it faster. And using the technology reduces strain on the animal, reduces strain on the donor, encourages adoptions faster and commitment faster, and allows us to upsell. Wow, we can actually generate revenue from this experience that goes back in to solve more of our challenges at the shelter level.
Yeah, I was going to say, Shopify's already got the co-products and byproducts and upsells and discounts and promotions and like on and on and on. It's all built into it. So John, take us back. I mean, when did you find your passion for animals? Were you a child? Was it in your adult years? Like, tell us the story.
I always ask this question when I'm interviewing folks or why did you become a board member? And I always hear the stories of, you started out and, became a pet lover. For me, it started with a guinea pig named Snowy. And I'm not going to, red eyes, white, loving animal, and devastated. One day I came home. That little guinea pig was my life. I was 7 years of age. Everything I was taught to be responsible. Came home from school one day, had eaten through its cardboard box. Back then, we just put a cardboard box down, and it disappeared. Snowy had disappeared, and we couldn't find Snowy again. Now, advance a couple days, no, everyone's thinking about Snowy just couldn't disappear like that. So, but it happened, obviously. I learned about 3 to 4 months after that Snowy had passed away. My parents cut a hole that it looked like Snowy had eaten. They removed Snowy. And then what happened is they told me that Snowy was gone, but that Snowy would find, a good life and everything was great. So as a child, I was devastated, yet I was kind of happy in the end that Snowy found the journey. But that kind of started my pathway for loving animals. Weird thing. But then I did fish, I did bird for a stint, and then eventually ended with dogs. And had been a dog lover for many, many years. My family, myself and the dog sat on the deck together and we would contemplate life together as my boxer Fred looked at the backyard and we would have these little conversations. So that is my story about why I love pets. But you know what? They love you regardless. And that is, to me, what interests me the most about animals is they have no bias. They will love you for who you are. They get to know you. They're one of the only creatures I know that will love you no matter what. Now, your mom might say she loves you no matter what, but listen, deep down, if you don't do Mother's Day, there's a problem. Something's going to happen.
Right. That's a true statement. But you're right. It's that unconditional love. It's that human-animal bond that when you find, I've obviously Doobert was my animal that I had, and now I've got many more. And you just find that connection. And like you said, they don't judge. They just love you for who you are. Whatever day you're having, they're there to comfort you.
Correct. Some people in my relationship will say that's not true, but for me, best companion ever.
Fair point. So, John, how did this then become your career, right? Because obviously you had a long career before this in retail, it sounds like, in marketing, you did all sorts of other things. What made you all of a sudden make the jump over to this side of the world?
I had to change a major life issue. I was enjoying life. I was in sales, traveling the world, getting to see the world. My family was looked after. And one day I drove home and my oldest daughter at the time, who was 5, wanted to learn how to ride her bicycle. And dad, working the red eye, traveling, thought I was doing the best thing ever. Drove in one day and coming in on Saturday morning after the red eye, and there she is on our driveway, riding her bike. And it hit me so hard that in the end, I thought I was missing, although I had given everything, big house, very little debt, all the things I thought life was always about. I had missed that moment. It really hit, still a little bit today. It hit it. And so I went into my job and quit my job the next day, literally came home, almost divorced. And the funny story of this is the second day I'm in the gardening away with Freddie beside me, having a great old day in my pajamas. I was enjoying life. And my wife drove in and said, "You have an interview with Habitat for Humanity tomorrow as the CEO." And that started my journey on not-for-profit. Spent 9 years there, really loved the mission. But at the end of every good run, I'm a visionary guy. So I'm a grower. I'm a builder. I'm the vision guy. I'm not the logistics operations type. So build that organization, grew it significantly. And then our friends here at the SPCA called me and said, "We would like you to come over and do the same thing here." And 3 years ago, we started, with a small group of folks. Now we're triple the size, we're triple the revenues. We're about to launch our 55,000 square foot fully engaged, every touch point along the spectrum of a wellness hub here in Hamilton, and we're very excited. So, for me, it's the ability to grow something that I am passionate about. It's the ability to change. It's the fact of the big picture that we need to always keep our eyes on. And we may not always get there, but if we don't think big, we're never going to change the game.
Yeah. I'm curious, John. I mean, you had a lot of years in the corporate world, learned a lot of leadership lessons. How do those carry over to the nonprofit world? How do you lead a team when it's just an emotional industry, right? And some days are just really bad days.
My whole philosophy is empower people, right? If people come to work every day, whether you're in the hospital, whether you're in the shelter, whether you are out with our foster families, whether you are dealing with a tragic issue, or whether you're on our fundraising team and you're getting a call from someone telling you about their story and why they give. To me, the power is the people talking to other people. And I feel that if we do that well, and we have really tried to make sure we spend 50% more time talking to our stakeholders, when we do that, we motivate change, we engage a brand, we launch, that experiential feeling that creates visionary leaders within the organization that want to be here every day, that are engaged with it. And I know it sounds, textbooky, but I'm a big believer that we need to spend more time on the experiential and less time on behind the desk in admin. And that's why I kind of always spin in the technology pitch. Because for me as a leader, I need my people to meet and engage with other people, real people. That's the part I feel we've lost a little bit. Everything is now digital, what we're doing here is exactly what I'm talking about. It's about sharing, talking, experiencing those things. But we need to do that with each one of our stakeholders, whether they be foster parents, whether it be a new adopter, whether they be someone who just had surgery done for their animal from a spay and neuter. Yeah. Each one of those people want to talk. They want to share. They want to ask questions. That's what differentiates. And I think the animal space is so much better off if we do that, because we're an emotional space, right? There's a lot of emotion in this environment. It's not like buying toilet paper or tissue or mascara. There's a very big difference.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that's really important. There's a user experience that we've come to expect. The simple one I tell people all the time, that at least, it's probably more now, 80% of internet traffic is on mobile. And yet you go to most websites, particularly in the animal welfare space, and they're not optimized for mobile. It's not a good user experience. It's difficult to find information. It's difficult. So what do you have to do? They say, well, just call us. And me personally, I hate being on the phone, right? I mean, go back 20 years, we called everybody, but now it's like, if I can't find the information, I go solve my problem with another company. I go find another way, right? Enter in backyard breeders, enter in, reputable breeders, all these other types of alternatives. And we do this to ourselves. And I think it's a really astute point, John, to say user experience matters. How you communicate and talk to people, how they feel. It's a mission, it's a passion that we're trying to ignite in them for what they're doing.
Everyone that comes to work here is passionate, right? I know they're passionate about animals, but what I want them to do is translate that passion out. Show your passion, because that brings people into us. That entices them into us for a cause, and that cause then we leverage and we build that relationship to a point where they become a volunteer, a donor, an adopter. That's the power we have as an industry. That's a power as we have as a channel that I wish people would adopt more. Literally, no pun intended.
Yeah, I totally get it. John, what have you learned about yourself in this process as you made the pivot out of corporate into the nonprofit and now ultimately into the animal side of things? What have you learned about yourself in this process?
Wow, that's a really good question. One is move fast, but make sure you have the right people on the bus. In an industry where passion is key, you still need smart thinkers. You still need people thinking out of the box, problem solvers. So as I reflect on myself as a leader, I also look back to the fact that I have to empower people to make decisions. We have to empower people to make issue or fail or, require assistance. If we don't do that, we're moving too slow. And if we move too slow, we will never, ever solve the ultimate problem, which is overpopulation, which is geographic relocation. It's servicing folks that can't afford veterinarian care. But I find what I've learned most about this is, as organizations, we don't do enough. I, as a CEO, don't do enough of advocacy to change and really call out what we need to do differently, because we're also afraid to balance our audiences. So are we going to call out overbreeding? Are we going to call out, the lack of spay and neuter because the costs are too high? Are we going to call out that we're not engaging volunteers enough because we're control freaks? These are all things I'm learning as I take away from this. And how do we really change that and adapt that to be more of an outcome? Again, I believe fundamentally we don't do enough measurement either. We may talk big picture, but we don't do enough measurement either, kind of tied to the technology side. So I've learned that I need to apply that and build that enthusiasm with our staff and encourage them to make, to have an error, encourage them to fail. We do foster fails all the time. We love it. We love foster fails. Why don't we love empowering our people to make change? That's what I've learned here, is that they need more ability to do that.
Yeah, it's a really astute point again, because, we're humans by nature, and some of these things are just ingrained in us, that control, that micromanagement, that nobody's going to do it like I do it. And it's hard to let go. So I think it's a really good reminder. John, I've got my time machine right here. So if you and I go back to your younger years, what advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. Graduated high school, was involved in a lot of things. Thanks to my parents, I was fortunate to have a lot of experiences and to share that. So if I look back now and where I am today and talk about, what would I maybe do differently, or, where did I start, or where could I pick up? I'm going to probably give you an answer for a guy that likes change and for a guy that really likes to make sure we're doing the right stuff and we think big, we're aiming big.
Yeah.
I really do like some quiet time. People ask me what my passion is. My passion is work. And I know that sounds terrible for work-life balance, but if I was to go back and to change anything, I would say do exactly what I did to get here. Because I think without all of those learning experiences that I've had, those leaders that I had to work for, some good, some bad, being a newspaper boy, being the guy that, ran my little OJ's odd jobs, what I learned back then, based on my parents and based on kind of the work ethic, is that I wouldn't want to change where I am today. I think those challenges and hurdles have taught me more than any book I learned in a university class or any book I learned in a professional certification. The day-to-day running is really about how you look at things differently and being positive. And that's what I've never lost. Went through a lot of things in life, but maintain your positivity and everything will be perfectly well in the end.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I always say pivot, right? There's a lot of pivots. I've tried so many things that were just epic failures, and you kind of dust yourself off. You say, all right, well, that didn't work. Let's try something different. And what you find is every time it gets you closer and closer, really, it's like there's no straight line. You juke this way and that way, and sometimes you go backwards, but you still are looking forward as to what your goal is. And through all those pivots, like you said, working for people that are not necessarily good leaders and those that are, and, trying and failing and all these other things, you learn who you are and you learn to find that leadership within you.
Listen, I think most of my skills I've ever learned are learning from problems, failures, leaders that I respected, leaders that I didn't respect. And I think, when I even look at this I look at our animal welfare space, how we do things, I look at others, I compare ourselves to others. I had this conversation yesterday. One of my colleagues in the area celebrated that they finally adopted an animal that was in their care for 364 days. To me, that's not a celebration. That's a failure. For us to celebrate they finally got adopted is great for the shelter, but I don't think it tells the story of what we all are trying to do, which is try to find homes for these animals at in a faster way, so they can truly get to a culture where they feel safe and they feel loved again. But I look at these things and I say, those are the kind of little hurdles that you learn over time and you take away. You go, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be celebrating that. I want to be celebrating 30 days. And the fact that animal was literally in our shelter for 24 hours and the rest of the time they were with a loving family until absolutely up to adoption.
Yeah. Until my vision, exactly. I always say, unless medically or behaviorally required, all animals should be in foster, right? There's certainly some that do require some professional level of assistance, but for the majority of them, they thrive better. They're less stress. We have all the data to show, right? They're healthier, less disease, they cost less, right? Like on and on and on. We really need to focus on growing. I mean, in the US, there's 330 million people. More than enough people for a foster home for every animal that we currently have in a shelter.
You bring a really good point up. The challenge is not the foster side. The challenge is the resource side to a good foster relationship. You and I have chatted that, having a third party or having access to care during those evening hours, weekends, holidays, when staff have been utilized all day long, you've got to use those technologies, those partnerships, those third parties to drive that relationship so that it's easy for someone to foster. We make it too difficult for someone to foster. They feel too much obligation to that anything could go wrong. It's their fault. And what we need to say is that you're wrapping your arms around them with both services and experience to say, we got you, don't worry. And by doing that and celebrating those folks, I truly believe that there should be no animal, unless they're in a protective custody state, there should be no animal in a shelter building. And that's why I really believe that we have to do a better job to engage animal lovers who might be at that point in their lifestyle that they don't want the full-time care of an animal, but boy, they love loving an animal. And I'm talking about loving the animal to death, right? Literally, do anything for it. But I think, again, it goes back to my point and your point about disruption. We have to think differently about how we attract fosters. We reward them. It is a 24/7 gig. Now, we have to remind ourselves that they're a really important part of our structure, but sometimes I think they're the least recognized and rewarded.
Yeah. Fair point. So, John, as we start to wrap up and come to the end of the show, I always like to end with a lightning round where we get to ask a bunch of questions and learn a little bit more about John the person. So you ready?
Okay.
All right. So you got to pick one. Do you prefer puppy breath or kitten purrs?
Oh, poppy breath.
Puppy breath. Okay. Yeah, there's something about that if we could bottle that stuff, right?
Yeah. If you could bottle that into a scent of candle, I don't know. It might be a little weird, but the true dog lovers.
Yeah, for sure. Are you an early bird or a late night owl?
Oh, definitely an early bird. Up
Okay.
before the alarm goes.
Nice. Okay. What do you like to do to decompress after a tough day?
Research. I love researching online and comparing. So I'm a business guy at heart. So that sounds really sad, but I read business magazines and things. So
No, that's not. Hey, I'm a lifelong learner, right? I love listening to podcasts and books. So I totally hear you there. I know you have pets, John. So if your pets were writing a Yelp review about you, how many stars do you think you'd get?
probably 3. I get 3 because listen, they don't always get the food they like. Sometimes I won't share a little human treat with them.
Sure.
Maybe they don't get out as much as I would like to go. They don't get to the pass they would like. If I really talked about their true, the princess state, I call it for Fred, it would be the fact that he probably doesn't get as much of what he wants, more structure from what I need. And although I love him to death and I would do anything for Fred, I do have to put some guardrails every once in a while that balance life out together. But he'd give me a 3. I think I deserve a 4, but I'll take a 3 because ultimately I know I'm not letting him play with his best friend every day.
I'd love to read the comments that Fred would write if he could write comments, right? That would be really interesting to see if he would say the same things like he doesn't let me do this, he doesn't let me do this, so he's only getting an average rating.
He doesn't let me go play with Cameron next door. I should be able to go outside after time. I want to go on the pathway with the rocks, but no, right. He takes me on the sidewalks. It's not as fun.
Yep, exactly. And John, my final question for you is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, that's a really great question. For me personally, I want to empower the next young leaders to step up and really think big. I feel that we are in a vacuum of a world where we are not taught to think big anymore. We're not taught to push the envelope, to disrupt, to change is a good thing. We're very cautious now. We become more cautious in a world, I think, that's very much a risk-driven reality. And I think we're losing those visionary leaders, those experiential leaders who are not afraid to disrupt and change and say, you know what, it's a risk, but we got to trial it. We got to pilot it. We've got to test it. And just like our Shopify, if we didn't believe that, we didn't see it as a Shopify platform, but we saw it as a way to move adoptions in a better way, faster way, and to be able to help the organization grow, we would have never got there. So my legacy is I want people to think differently about how they work, how they interpret work, and how they look at efficiency versus effectiveness.
That's amazing, John. You had me when you started that. I love that legacy. I think it's a vision that I can totally see you bring into reality. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being a disruptor and a leader in this industry. I truly appreciate it.
Listen, great to join you today, Chris. The bantering I love. I love good discussion. I love good debate. And I really feel that we need more of this in North America. We need more of this discussion. Conferences are great. I love them. They're powerful. But put us in a room and let's start debating about things, and let's really solve by tactfully talking about issues. And I think we'll do a much better job overall and be much more successful.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming on, John.
Thanks. Appreciate having me.